Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of our Across the Cloud series where we open the floor to EU Cloud CoC members to share a bit about their experience in joining the code's ecosystem and going through its adherence process. And my name is Gabriela Mercuri. I'm Managing Director of Scope Europe, the code's secretariat and monitoring body. And today I'm thrilled, I'm in great company as I will be speaking with Nicholas Knoop, the DPO of HubSpot. So welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
And without further ado, I will start by, perhaps it would be great to have your view on what is the added value. What do you believe is the added value of having such co-regulatory initiatives, such as the EU Cloud CoC, within the privacy environment? Like what kind of particular challenges when it comes to GDPR implementation that these tools can help you as a CSP tackle?
Sure. So I remember I led the GDPR implementation project back in 2017 and 2018 for HubSpot. And I remember, we were doing so much work around sort of up-leveling our privacy program, really building features into the product that can enable customers to comply with GDPR. Working on across the business to really get ready for the regulation, and at the time I remember thinking, we're going to have our sort of obligations via our DPA and our commitments to customers, but how do we really sort of demonstrate that compliance to customers? And I remember back then reading, I think it's Article 42 and 43 of the GDPR that talked about certifications, and thinking, well, when one of those gets sort of passed and approved by EU regulators, we're going to jump at that because that's a great opportunity to say, hey, customers, here's a sort of backed certification from EU regulators to sort of prove that compliance as a processor and as in support of our customers. So I think that's a key component of that, is really that that sort of third party, sort of independent certification of adherence to GDPR principles. I think on top of that, the EU Cloud Code of Conduct gives a framework for companies to use to implement GDPR sort of across the business, and particularly on sort of processing customer data. I think it's, privacy regulations, a rapidly evolving space, and there's always whether it's new regulations or new interpretations via enforcement or case law. It's an expanding space, and I think picking the right size sort of control framework to implement at a company can be challenging, and Cloud Code of Conduct gives you one of those, right? So it's a very specific set of controls that you implement and sort of ties together the obligations you're making to your customers and sort of how you implement those on within the company and back up those representations.
You touched upon several elements that I would like to perhaps dig in a little deeper, because one of the things is the specificity. I think the good thing about GDPR, obviously, when it came out, everyone was panicking a little bit because of those vague provisions. Yeah. And knowing that, the regulator anticipated this kind of implementation issues, and that's why codes of conduct and certifications are there. And there is this word specify is right there on Article 40 for codes of conduct, because the idea is exactly to provide tailored guidance for a certain sector, a segment of a sector, or a specific processing activity. Mm-hmm. So the EU Cloud CoC is really, as the name already gives it away, but is really tailored for the cloud sector. It's also a code that is tackling all cloud service layers, so from infrastructure to platform and software. So it's quite comprehensive. And based on that, on the added value of having this particular guidance for a specific sector that is key, right? When it comes to digitalization, is really the backbone, and is a key enabler for every other sector of our economy to go through digitalization and to innovate and grow. So based on that, can you give us some insights on actually the adherence process? How did it go for HubSpot? HubSpot has successfully gone through the adherence process of the EU Cloud CoC. So how is that for you guys, for your compliance team?
Sure. It was, like I mentioned, we had done a lot of work leading up to GDPR and thereafter to really implement GDPR across the company, shore up how we think about, building products that enable our customers to comply with GDPR as well. I think for us, implementing the Cloud Code of Conduct was really about sort of maturing the program overall. So in places where maybe we had, we were operationally doing things to comply with GDPR, but maybe we didn't have the right process sort of documented in a playbook that was sort of auditable and monitored and tested. Implementing the CoC really helped us sort of up-level that maturity and get that documentation organized and set up really auditable processes. On top of that, I think we learned there are some areas where we were stronger. I think as I mentioned, some of what we built into the product in terms of, allowing customers to process GDPR deletions in their HubSpot portal, which is a HubSpot account. Some of what we do on the back end to really comply with our DPA obligations around customer, data and what happens when they churn from HubSpot. We did a lot of great work there, and we felt like that was pretty well aligned already with what was needed out of the Cloud Code of Conduct. And I think we learned some areas where we needed to improve. As I mentioned, I think we were, complying with GDPR broadly. I think there were just areas where we needed to sort of improve our documentation and sort of mapping out our processes, and maybe not have those as ad hoc, but more a playbook that can be run, repeated consistently. I think, one area was, for example, how we support our customers when they have DPIA requirements. That I know that was specifically one that we worked on. And really, we supported that before CoC, but it was really just a matter of how we organize that internally and make sure we have a repeatable process for customers when that comes in.
Yeah, I think we hear that quite often, that definitely just the process of streamlining those answers, to concentrate them, to get them being monitored by a third party, in this case, Scope Europe as the accredited monitoring body of the EU Cloud CoC. This really helps, eases out the processes whenever you need to reply to any customer request, if you have any request from a DPA, for instance. So this is definitely a very, very important element, even if you have, as a CSP, already implemented all the technical and organizational measures to have everything there, concise and so forth is a critical aspect to facilitate compliance on a day-to-day. And I guess talking about compliance on the day-to-day, could you perhaps delve into a bit your role as a DPO, which is obviously a crucial role within this whole landscape, and what is the added value of having such a tool for when we're talking about your position precisely?
Sure. So I function as HubSpot's DPO. I also manage a team of lawyers and privacy specialists that sort of work across the business on both sort of advising every team at HubSpot on privacy or data protection issues. And then we also have sort of a privacy specialist org that helps on privacy operations, like responding to data subject requests, and also an office of the DPO that helps sort of with the governance and compliance sort of structure. And that team actually is what really helped drive the implementation of the EU Cloud Code of Conduct, along with our program management function that sits on the legal ops team, who actually helped organize and prepare for this interview. So thank you to that team. So I think in terms of, my role as DPO, I think it's really a matter of finding those sort of high-risk areas across the business, working with the business to understand how we're processing data, how that fits within the frameworks we've implemented, like SOC 2, like EU Cloud Code of Conduct, right? And making sure that the compliance commitments we have are being adhered to. I think, on top of that, it's, I think in terms of some of the challenges we're seeing, and I know we'll talk about AI in a moment, but certainly there's, and I think every company is probably dealing with this in terms of how to think about data use, and sort of how AI and some of the new risks from AI use fit into that. So that's certainly one of the challenges. I think, in a way, the EU Cloud Code of Conduct helps us sort of, I think in a way, scale up how we show our commitments to customers. I think we just pulled data on how many times the EU Cloud Code of Conduct report has been pulled down from our Trust Center, which is where we organize all of our security, privacy documentation. I think we've seen 350 plus downloads just this quarter. So that shows customers really want to read this material, and it's a big part of their, they're putting their trust in HubSpot, and that's verified trust. So I think in terms of sort of the day-to-day there, it's very clear that customers, are responding well to having this certification.
Definitely, and I think, when you talk about cloud, it's still, obviously it's a much more, let's say, disseminated technology today, but it's still for most a black box. It's a complex technology, and to have this sort of instruments that more easily, you can see that this service provider is compliant, and you have this compliance mark in the case of the EU Cloud CoC that really facilitates risk assessments on the controller side. So this is definitely something, one of the most important points there is a legal proof of compliance, and it kind of flows down the chain, right? Because if you are a processor, a cloud processor, and then you have a legal proof of compliance, and you're a controller, and you are in the process of choosing a cloud provider, and you can demonstrate that you have evaluated whether or not they have themselves a legal proof of compliance and went through the assessment of an independent third party, that's extremely helpful.
Totally. And just to jump in, it also helps sort of up and downstream, right? So it's customer to HubSpot processor, but also the processors we use to support the products or our sub-processors, right? Those obligations flow down, and it sort of helps set a benchmark against those sub-processors as well. So it's a super useful tool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also then when we talk about all this complexity also within the cloud industry with processors and sub-processors, and there's a lot that we could discuss there, but just the fact that you have this tool with certain technical and organizational measures that all the authorities within the EU said okay to, which it's quite rare in EU policy to have everyone giving their blessings. So within the EDPB, an approved code of conduct, for those who aren't familiar, needs to receive the green light from the whole EDPB, and that's quite an achievement. And one of the, I think, the most important elements there is to create a harmonization, right? That's where legal certainty comes from. So if you have all those complex, long chains of processing activities, it's really helpful to harmonize those technical and organizational measures, and you are implementing robust ones that have been blessed by the authorities. So, yeah, and I think as you already mentioned AI, we're talking complexity, we're talking, so processing chains, everything. And you said something very interesting in the beginning, that you kind of followed the whole process of the implementation of GDPR within HubSpot from your first days already, which is quite cool. And now we are seeing, obviously, the whole regulatory wave coming with AI, which also brings another layer, let's say a very big layer of complexity, especially if you're already talking about a regulated environment. So how do you believe the lessons learned, perhaps, with these compliance tools within the privacy sphere can help us better regulate and better implement AI regulations?
Yeah, I think the challenge right now with AI is that the technology is changing so quickly. I think regulators are doing their best to keep up and sort of understand the new tech. I just saw last night, I think Anthropic launched a new model that can sit in the background of your computer and almost use your machine for you. I think they're calling it computer use, which is just, the demo is just insane. So I think that's an example where that's a sort of new risk area that a regulator, that a company is going to have to think about. Okay, what are some of the risks that can come from that sort of use? So I think in terms of how to think about frameworks like the EU Cloud CoC and how that can inform AI, and I think everyone is trying to figure out AI governance right now. Every IAPP conference, every law firm call I join, AI governance is the thing everyone is trying to get right and figure out how to right size it for their org as well. Because part of this is, depending on where a company is in their AI journey, trying to implement a strict framework, if there was an EU Cloud CoC conduct parallel, that might not be right for where you are in terms of your AI adoption. It might just not fit the right risk sizing. At the same time, having something where you can have a set of controls to say, hey, we're going to try to fit this to fit our use within some basic guardrails here, could be very important. I think we've, at HubSpot, really in the past 18 months, we've developed out sort of both what I would say external, so in terms of the products and services we're building for customers to use that are powered by AI, and then also internal, which would be how HubSpotters use AI at the company. We've built out some best practices documentation for employees to use in terms of both building those products, but also using AI internally. We developed an AI ethics framework, which was really principles-based, transparency, accountability, and then had an effort around how do we operationalize those principles. So as an example, we have AI model cards, which are, I believe it's behind HubSpot.ai.com. I got it right. And if that's not right, just search HubSpot AI model cards. And those are sort of transparency cards on our major models that power the product and what data is being used, how to turn those features off and on. And that's really us trying to say, okay, we have these principles around AI ethics and transparency. How do we actually operationalize those? And that's a model card showing customers what's going on with their data. So I think sort of starting from that principles-based approach, finding the right type of guardrails to start, and then controls as we have regulations being passed and laws to adhere to. I think that's sort of the journey that everyone will go on.
Yeah, and I guess one of the I don't know, when it comes, you just said everyone is trying to wrap their heads around AI governance right now, and I think what a code of conduct, at least within when we look at GDPR's framework, is pretty helpful, is because it's a platform, right? So as is an industry-driven tool, but it needs the blessings of the authorities. So there's a lot of back and forth in the approval process, which obviously helps a lot. It's about mutual understanding as well. I think once you have this sort of structured framework for the approval process, then it enables the industry to sit together and try to figure things out themselves, and then sit together with the authorities that will eventually oversee compliance, and then, exchange and this mutual understanding, because it would be impossible for the authorities to understand the challenges of every single sector, right? Yeah. So this exercise in itself, obviously you don't need to replicate exactly the same model. I mean, AI has several specificities that needs to be addressed, but to kind of look at this experience and see how it's supporting so many providers and so many cloud users out there, I think it would be a very important exercise to kind of leverage that and don't try to always reinvent the wheel, right? And I think players like you guys would be definitely willing to sit together and try to figure those things out.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% agree.
All right. It has been a pleasure. I think we are running out of time, unfortunately. But on behalf of the whole EU Cloud CoC community of Scope Europe, thank you so much for taking the time today. It has been an absolute pleasure. And for the audience, those ones that are still with us, thank you for watching. And if you're interested to learn more about the EU Cloud CoC or the work of Scope Europe as its dedicated monitoring body, please do not hesitate to reach out to us via the contact forms in our websites, and look forward to see you next time. Bye-bye.